The Standard has impressed the former Melbourne-based judge Erica Sanders, who is now curator at the Newcastle Art Gallery. The paintings have a strong emphasis on Newcastle scenes.
I think Novocastrians are very proud of their city and they like to represent it in a very flamboyant, joyous way. Most of the scenes are quite sunny and lots of scenes with Nobby's head.
In the individual categories, John Morris won the painting section with his work Untitled, while in the drawing category, Shirley Cameron Roberts' work called Travelling Back in Time is the winner. The print section was won by Mark Stanley Barnes for his dramatic piece My Nightmare Falling into Flames of Hell, while sculptor Braden Snape stood out with his work titled Prevail. A detailed painting of Broadmeadow Racecourse by Beverly Muriel won the special regional theme section. Erica Sanders says she looks for a certain life in the work when judging.
It has to be also contain something of the heart, something to be said that you can feel. It has to speak to you as well. So I look for work that communicates.
Amanda Bolger, NBN News.
Stewart will return to Malaysian club Johor this week and has playing commitments in Singapore next Monday. His presence has been a bonus for the Breakers and despite some disappointing results has great faith in the club's future.
Because he said all along we have to be patient and the team's very young and I think it's if the patience is had by the committee and the supporters, in 2 or 3 years we'll see the benefits.
Stewart is contracted to Johor until the end of next year, but is hopeful of returning to the Breakers for a stint next summer.
I'd like to do that. I've spoke to Cozzy about it and if he's happy with my effort over here this time, I'm sure we'll come up with some deal.
Hector Lopez is one of boxing's more colourful characters, physically and verbally.
I try to put on a show and give you a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and that's what you'll see on the floor.
Costa Zoo says Lopez was his toughest opponent, and next Monday he goes up against the Philippines' Ernie Alesna, a victory bringing him one step closer to a world title fight, possibly in Newcastle.
We are sort of in the process of negotiating for a fight, and very possibly not Sydney, but very possibly Newcastle here. And I hope therefore people will come out and see what Hector's all about, so they can come and see him fight for the world title in the very near future.
Also after a world title shot, Casino's undefeated Justin Rousel, who once again be fighting in what's virtually his own backyard.
Yeah, well, it's only 4 hours up the road to Casino, so it's got a big country atmosphere in Newcastle, and it's always great to get back here and fight.
He'll fight American Steve Valdez, who yesterday sparred with Newcastle's Peter Bell, who is also on the undercard of the Thunder in the Hunter promotion. If successful, Rousel could also be chasing further riches later in the year.
If with a little bit of luck and continued good form, well then there's no reason why later on this year that we can't have a nibble at something very, very high up in the world ratings.
More than 300 people attended tonight's Mariners launch, an impressive show with a fireworks spectacular lighting up the skies around Newcastle. The players were introduced, followed by the coach, and then the Mariners strip, displayed by Robbie McCormack and Noel Goldthorpe. Since Justice Burchett handed down his decision last Friday, the Mariners have maintained a positive approach, and tonight was no exception. The club not ruling out a kick-off in Super League this weekend.
Look, I can't even say this weekend's game's off at this stage, but we will be sympathetic to anything the court would like us to do.
The club wouldn't elaborate any further, but did reveal that players from the 8 Super League clubs had signed affidavits stating they would not play in an ARL competition. The Mariners also confirmed their players were involved in another video hookup tonight and played down today's court orders.
Today wasn't a setback at all. I thought today was a great day. It really gave us the decision. Now we know where we're coming from and what we've got to do to fix it.
And earlier today, the Mariners co-owner was convinced Super League would win their appeal.
He's only one judge, though, and I fully expect three judges in the appeal process would reverse that.
They're likely to get to the show and have a good time, and then on their way home decide they're going to vote and find it's after 6 o'clock and polling places have closed.
And of course there's no polling at the showground.
No, there's not.
Initial preparations for the big event were underway today, organisers doing their best to ignore the wet weather. Several competitors took the opportunity to get in some early practice runs on the river. More than 50 skiers from around the world are expected to compete.
We'll have slalom tricks and jumping for men and slalom and jumping for women. Plus there'll be barefoot drags.
One competitor displayed some of his tricks today. Organisers are hoping for clear weather, with the event set to begin on Saturday morning.
If we get a lot of rain, obviously it would be a big problem, but if it just stays light, we can still get by, but of course it'll be a little bit unpleasant.
Emma Siossian, NBN News.
At a charity donation ceremony today, Mariners officials confirmed a game was being considered, despite rulings from the court that Super League games cannot go ahead.
Yeah, it's really a matter for the players. If they think that there's a need to play or they wish to organise, that's really purely up to them.
The players have continued to keep fit, with a game against Adelaide a possibility. But with the other matches cancelled, the Mariners too decided to forget the idea. Meanwhile, the Mariners continue to try and work within the Newcastle community, with players and staff donating $10,000 to the Smith family. The team says the money will come through, even if the side is axed.
He told me, even no matter what happens in the courts and so forth, that as individuals it is a commitment that they're prepared to make for the next 12 months.
The Newcastle Baths are a favourite among both tourists and residents and have long been one of the area's most popular and well-known recreation spots. Artist James Willebrandt is now proposing to give the building and surrounding area a facelift, his recent artwork clearly illustrating some of his ideas. James favours a return to a more Art Deco appearance, with the seawall to be repainted its original blue.
I think it should be really looked at again as the way it would have been painted back in those days, which probably would have been whites and blues and light blues and light ochres. The colours of the sand and the waves and the sea and the sky.
The suggestion is only an idea at this stage, with the formal proposal yet to go before Newcastle Council.
And I think maybe the next time it comes around for a repaint, they should take something on board as its fantastic white facade, as I say, with the blue trim.
Emma Siossian, NBN News.
In Newcastle Court yesterday, the New South Wales Police Service's Liquor Enforcement Agency lodged its objection to David Briggs being confirmed as the licensee of the Shortland Hotel. In documents presented to the court, the agency claims Briggs is not a fit and proper person to hold the licence because he omitted certain matters from an affidavit. It's taken us all day to be able to see these documents, which were placed on public record as a matter of course. However, an unsigned note which was attached to the papers yesterday said they weren't for the media to see. Now, despite numerous phone calls today, no one has admitted making that order. The documents were couriered to Sydney late this afternoon. The matter is expected to be heard in court there next week. Among the issues to be raised, why a $130,000 loan from disgraced Detective Graham Fowler to buy the hotel wasn't mentioned in Mr Briggs's application. Both Briggs and Fowler have been temporarily barred from the pub until the matter is heard. In a record of interview between police and Graham Fowler, Mr Fowler says he wishes people would leave Mr Briggs alone. He says David is not in good health and he has been harassed and intimidated by the police service, the Department of Gaming and Racing and the media because of our association. Mr Fowler says he hasn't been charged with any offence, and I wish to remind everybody that I served the New South Wales Police Service faithfully for nearly 33 years. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Top seed for the pro event, Adam Smith hit the water at the Cliff at Newcastle with main rival and last year's winner Steve McKenzie. Both have just returned from competing in Hawaii, and while conditions today were small in comparison, the nation's number one says it's a real leveller in competition.
When it's small conditions like this, everyone sort of becomes a lot closer in the competition side of things, so I think it's going to be really tough and should be some pretty close heats.
It's the third year the pro event has been staged at Newcastle, and local bodyboarder Steve McKenzie has made it a successful hunting ground.
Yeah, I've won this contest. They've had it 2 years and I've won it the last 2 years, so I've got to try and make it a hat trick. There's a bit of pressure on me actually.
Competition begins tomorrow with the finals on Sunday. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
The Kiwi Star Dancer started at sevens, while the Remus was among the tail enders, as was fellow Melbourne Cup winner Jearn in the St George Stakes. And it was the same in the Blue Diamond down the Flemington Strait. In Sydney, Chlorophyll made it 3 straight in the Liverpool City Cup, while Danewin was disappointing in the Chipping Norton Stakes. Another winner to Gay Waterhouse, while Danewin was one of the last across the line.
The swing was big, bad and early for Bob Horn supporters, their victory party quickly turning into a wake at a Maitland pub. As the results were phoned through, it was obvious the local member was in trouble.
When the Liberals only held 8 seats in New South Wales out of 50 after the 1993 election, they had to come back. The law of averages says they had to come back.
Both candidates wouldn't claim victory, with the swing against Bob Horn not as strong as experienced across the state. It was a carnival atmosphere at Bob Baldwin's office, supporters celebrating the first coalition federal government in 13 years. The Liberal candidate may have been blowing his own horn over the national result, but he was more cautious about his chances of winning Paterson. Baldwin leads by less than 1%, with at least 10,000 postal and absentee votes still to be counted, with a final outcome not expected before Thursday.
I'd like to feel confident, but it's been a very, very hard, tough battle.
But the advice to me from the electoral office was, you're going to have a few sleepless nights.
Former Communications Minister Michael Lee also has a few restless nights ahead. He trails by just over 100 votes in the seat of Dobell. Frank Walker's fate has already been sealed in the Central Coast seat of Robertson, an 11% swing against Labor, giving it to Liberal Jim Lloyd. The pattern was repeated across the region, Joel Fitzgibbon holding on to the seat his father held despite a double-digit swing against him. Peter Morris has withstood an 11% swing to retain Shortland, his brother Alan also holding on to Newcastle. Voters deserted Labor in droves in the seat of Charlton, but Bob Brown still managed to keep the seat. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
A variety of jazz and blues music floated through the streets at Hamilton, setting plenty of toes tapping and hips swinging. Organisers say as many as 35,000 fans crowded into Beaumont Street, enjoying non-stop music with 16 different bands performing. The jazz ranged from the traditional Dixie through to the new wave of music, appealing to both young and old. Organisers say next year's festival will feature a new competition to find the best local talent, to be judged by national jazz figures.
The votes for the seat of Paterson were being recounted today at Maitland's Masonic Hall. There were a few discrepancies, but not enough to dent the 500 vote lead enjoyed by the Liberal challenger Bob Baldwin. Labor's Bob Horn now needs a minor miracle to retain the seat, needing 53% of the 10,000 postal and absentee votes. And it hasn't taken long for the post-mortem to begin. The new member for Hunter, Joel Fitzgibbon, already calling for changes.
The swing came in what I describe as my heartland. The message is clear, that is that there is perception that our direction isn't the correct direction, and I've heard that message loud and clear, and I'll be making plenty of noise in Canberra to ensure we go back to what people expect, that is a more traditional Australian Labor Party.
There are also questions being raised over Labor's opposition to the sale of Telstra to fund the Coalition's environment policy.
Look, I don't think we had any credibility on Telstra, for example, after flogging off the Commonwealth Bank. I think that decision was bad, and to try to charge the other side with a similar crime, I think was just hopeless for us.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
The Australian Rugby League's media arm confirmed a test match would be held at Marathon Stadium later this season. It's likely to be against Fiji, and while the ARL wouldn't give a definite date, it's understood it could be as early as Anzac Day in April. Meantime, 10,000 turned out at the test venue last night to see Andrew Johns pilot his side to an early lead against an informed South Queensland. Johns also instigated the night's second try, a long-range effort with Lee Jackson's support play rewarded after winger Darren Albert kept the movement alive. 10-0 behind, a Rooster-turned-crusher, Nigel Gaffey put South Queensland on the board before night centre Brett Grogan danced his way to the line. Gaffey replied, showing surprising pace for a lock, narrowing the Knights' half-time lead to just 4 points. The second half was a scrappy affair, Tony Hearn giving the Crushers the lead before the Johns-Albert combination snatched it back in spectacular fashion. Robbie O'Davis was at his fleet-footed best at both ends of the ground, starting and finishing an impressive set of 6, which sealed the match. Glanville's foot injury the only injury concern.
It's nowhere near as bad as last year. I think I've just bruised the foot, so hopefully a bit of icing and physiotherapy during the week. It should be okay.
And good news for Andrew Johns, who isn't expecting any further problems with a troublesome groin injury.
I'm pretty confident it'll be 100%.
But the coach is adamant there'll be no more trials.
We've picked up a lot of injuries. I've got to get the guys fully fit and get the right team on the park. Quite frankly, if we carry on, it's we're just running out of players before we start.
Right, I need today to tell you that for the past 16 years I've been living with a lie.
It was an incredible public confession to an amazing public deception. Paul Radley claims his great-uncle, Jack Radley, wrote the book that won him the 1980 Australian Vogel Literary Award. It shot the 18-year-old to instant fame. He was named Young Australian of the Year and became a writer in residence at a university in the UK. Jack Radley wasn't at his Warrabrook home today. It's believed he's gone into hiding after last week's amazing allegations. But his sister, Ruby Lachlan, has broken the family silence. She says Paul dictated the book, Jack merely typed it. But Paul maintains that he merely came up with the idea for the book, a boy with an imaginary friend.
I knew Jack Rivers and me was going to be entered into it, and at that stage I was talked into going ahead with it and claiming to be the author.
His publisher, Allen & Unwin, will make a statement later this week, but they are reported to be shocked by the announcement. They won't speculate on whether Paul Radley will keep the Australian Vogel Literary Award. If he does, he'll surely become the first winner to claim that he doesn't deserve it.
Couldn't even write a letter. I just embarrassed about if I wrote a letter, that people would think, oh well, it's not set out properly, or it's not. There was a spelling mistake there or something. I very rarely put any pen to paper.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News. Residents walked into local member Jeff Hunter's office today, armed with more than 7,000 letters concerned about the proposed new longwall mine under Fennell Bay in Fassifern.
They still haven't explained to us why we had the problems with number 13, and yet they're going to be seeking permission for number 15 very shortly.
The trouble started late last year when residents reported strong vibrations from the number 13 longwall. They now want assurances that the number 15 longwall won't result in a repeat performance.
The residents know they're in a mine subsidence area. They accept mine subsidence, but they shouldn't be woken up at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning with vibrations that are like a blast, like a jumbo jet flying over their home.
The letters will be passed on to Mining Minister Bob Martin. NBN hasn't been able to contact the developer Oceanic Coal. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Beedman's Mount Wild Prince had crossed the line in the last event before it inexplicably crashed to the turf. Beedman was taken to hospital and today underwent intensive physio. The 30-year-old was to ride the Oscars in Wednesday's Coca-Cola Classic, which has produced 3 Golden Slipper winners, including Torres and Marauding. His place will be taken by Gauchi, with the Oscars drawn in 8, favourite Baru wide in 15 and Robert Thompson's ride Gold Coin in 2.
Paul Perry, no doubt, welcomed today's rain, even though we didn't. He's got a great mate like in Gold Coin, who's won both his starts here in the wet.
And if you do your cash on Wednesday, you can recoup on Thursday with the Group 3 Tui's Newmarket The Feature. Today's draw not kind to fancied runners Catalan Opening and Persian Flyer, with the winner qualifying for the Doncaster.
We've got a capacity field and a number of leading Doncaster hopes with top jockeys such as Shane Dye, Wayne Harris, etc. It'll be a great betting race.
Although he's ridden track work every morning over his 3.5-week enforced holiday, courtesy of the stewards, Alan Robinson has been a busy boy. When he's not at the pool table, there's the housework, not to mention feeding the ducks and preparing for his wedding next month. But over time, Robbo has grown used to these diversions away from the track, as it's his 43rd suspension, and he's now rivalling his great mate, Malcolm Johnson.
I'm getting near him, so I think he's coming out of retirement because I'm getting, a tad too close to him.
And just to make life even more interesting, Robinson is involved in legal proceedings against a newspaper.
It's in the hands of my solicitor, Paul O'Sullivan. I've been advised I can't talk on behalf of it, so we've just got to see how it settles.
He'll be one of several jockeys and trainers in Newcastle over the next 2 days, along with other leading identities such as veteran racecaller Bill Collins, who was guest at a pre-carnival lunch today. Despite recent rain here at Broadmeadow, the track is expected to be rated good for tomorrow's program. For that reason, our red-hot tipster Gary Harley believes we should have a wager on Darren Gauchi's Mount the Oscars in the feature event, the Coca-Cola Classic. That's race 8, number 13, the Oscars.
The 3 women in the Datsun Stanza died when the driver lost control of the car in wet conditions. The vehicle spinning across the road into the path of an oncoming Mazda on Maitland Road. The driver is in a serious but stable condition. The 4 women had been at a meeting at the Macedonian Orthodox Church where they were discussing plans for European Mother's Day this Saturday.
The families are shocked, relatives, friends, the whole community is in shock.
Police have released the women's names. They were 35-year-old Jordanka Matevsky from Ties Hill, Vesa Nidovska and 43-year-old Margaret Apostolovsky, both from Hamilton. The crash happened outside the Ties Hill Tech College. The occupants of the other car, all students returning to classes. The horror of yesterday's tragic crash is still being felt at the TAFE College. So concerned is the campus manager about this now notorious stretch of road, she's putting together a proposal to have road safety improved.
I hear at least 3 or 4 near misses every day from my office.
Christine Warrington wants a guardrail installed.
We also need to look at the way the road is designed, maybe looking at a divided road with an Armco fence.
Jane Anderson, NBN News. Rabbits are destroying plants at Sandgate Cemetery, in turn causing erosion and, in some cases, actual graves to collapse. The Sandgate Cemetery Trust has taken action, saying it's essential the problem is brought under control. However, Animal Liberation says using pindone rabbit baits to kill the animals is cruel.
You're talking about a poison that takes between 4 and 11 days to kill the animal. It's an anticoagulant, so the animal basically bleeds internally, and as anyone could imagine, that the suffering that the animal would endure from bleeding internally would be enormous.
Darren Brollo is urging the Cemetery Trust to immediately stop the poisoning. It wants them to meet with members of Animal Liberation to discuss humane methods of managing the rabbit population.
Gassing the warrens themselves would be the way they would go ahead with carbon monoxide.
Ironically, the rabbits may be facing death on another front. The contagious Khaleesi virus, recently accidentally released in South Australia, is expected in the Hunter region within a month. Jane Anderson, NBN News.